morning once again, and thank you all so much for being here. Missed you. I missed you last week. Glad to be with you on this morning. You know, as usual, I'll just start with a couple of general updates, and then we'll go right into questions and answers based on what you want to hear and learn more about. As it relates to public safety, you know, I look at the preliminary data only from the New Orleans Police Department this week, May 27th through June 3rd, compared to the week prior to. Again, just seeing fewer murders, sexual assaults, armed robberies, and carjackings compared to the week prior to. Significantly, though, looking at vehicular burglaries, which has just been a big issue throughout the year, really saw a steep decline. 39 last week compared to 68 the week before. So the deployment strategies initiated by the New Orleans Police Department, we're just really starting to see them bear fruit. Year-to-date stats using, again, preliminary data from the New Orleans Police Department that same week, comparing 23 to 2022, just continues to show steady progress. Murders down 10%, carjackings 42%, non-fatal shootings incidents down 11%, non-fatal shooting victims are down 14%, armed robberies 20% down, total crimes against persons are down 16%. Now, this doesn't mean at all, right, that we haven't seen violence in the city of New Orleans. No doubt about that, meaning being very upfront and honest about that. However, we do see that we're continuing, though, to trend in the right direction, continuing to see strong results from the New Orleans Police Department as it relates to arrests and the like, and just swift investigative practices, and especially even with the challenges of manpower. The men and women of the New Orleans Police Department continue every day, giving it all that they have, and of course, we pushing towards working throughout the criminal justice system, meaning the system has to function for this community, this city, to be safe and to remain on that steady trajectory. As of June 5th, the New Orleans Police Department confiscated 1,307 guns so far, compared to 980 guns confiscated the same time period in 2022, just showing an increase of 33%. Getting guns off the street is something that we have to continue to do. I think the scariest for me is just how many guns are on the street. No matter how well we're doing getting them off, there are just countless more on the streets of New Orleans. And we see how those guns play out in real life and in real time when you talk about violent crime in our community. Whether it's, a car accident, two people get out, pull their weapons, someone shot in the head, killed, 2-year-old in the car as well. These things, of course, domestic violence, we're seeing as it relates to homicides in our city. Again, people who know people, relationships are just what's going on throughout our city. The New Orleans Police Department will host another gun safety program. We kicked off this program. We have classes that we have been able to hold throughout the city of New Orleans. The last one, we had over 150 residents participate. So this is something that we will continue to do. Driving education, it is key. The North facilities, and some in conjunction with Midnight Basketball that started June the 1st. So June 9th will be at Joe Brown, the gym. June 16th will be at Morris Jeff Gym. June 23rd will be at St. Bernard Gym. Working closely with the Violent Crime Reduction Task Force to identify high crime areas, letting the data drive solutions and where deployment practices are held relative to the New Orleans Police Department and all partners within our city. The Department of Public Works has removed 612 abandoned vehicles from our streets since January 11th through June 1st. This is, I'm telling you, great work by DPW. Just giving a shout out to the staff, the leadership there, including over 100 vehicles removed in Council Districts B, D, and E, high crime areas, and we know for a fact that some of these vehicles are used to continue the efforts in terms of from the criminal's perspective of violent crime in the city. So anytime we can remove these vehicles from the street, getting trash out of the eyes of our people, I do believe that it has an impact on our residents' daily quality of life and just overall behavioral health in the city. I came in and basically telling you I missed you. I did. You know that I was out participating in a couple of things. One, nationally and internationally, was invited, being the only United States mayor to participate in the World Climate Industry Expo in Busan, South Korea. Simply because the city of New Orleans is the city in the United States that is moving forward, putting infrastructure investments first, as we are on the front lines of climate change, and we're seeing the results of these investments. They are critical, meaning we're continuing to stay focused every day. You know that leveraging the federal dollar, even with our bond funding, it is making this city safer and just protecting ourselves relative to climate change in our community. And as a low-lying coastal city, we have lessons that we have deployed here that others are learning from. We need to own that, we need to respect that, and it does make a difference. Even was paid a visit by our sister city, Jeanju. They paid a special visit, the mayor did, in terms of making sure the staff was present, sent a delegation to meet with the city of New Orleans, not about LaToya Cantrell, all about the city of New Orleans, and making sure that we're able to move forward with additional cultural experiences, educational experiences, particularly just again how we are woven in terms of our cultural fabric, and again being on the front lines of climate change. Coming back this week from the U.S. Conference of Mayors, the 91st annual meeting, in which the city of New Orleans, meaning our leadership, has always been front and center with USCM. That's why you've had over 5 mayors of the city of New Orleans actually lead in regards to being the president of USCM, and even as it relates to Moon Landrieu being on the front lines of leadership. And it's been a priority for me to make sure the city of New Orleans remains connected in a leadership capacity with USCM, in which I am very honored to do so. Again, focusing very heavily on infrastructure, heavily on climate, heavily on violent crime that we're seeing plague our communities throughout this country, heavily on mental health. This is something that is going to be embraced 100% by the new leadership, Mayor Sheevy, who's taken over, and I have been really aligned not only with Mayor Sheevy, but I do believe that I'm going to take a leadership role relative to mental health. We're seeing it on the front lines in our city and the impacts that it's having on our people, on violent crime in our community, and it's something that we can no longer, meaning cities across this country, stand on the sidelines about. We've been front and center simply because we're mayors. It's bipartisan. Listen, we always say it's not Republican, it's not Democrat, it's mayors, because we have to lead in spite of what's happening at the federal level and even at the state level. And when it comes to mental health, we have to unlock resources that are held at the state and even at the federal level relative to mental health. It plagues everything that we're dealing with here in our city. Violent crime, domestic violence, depression, anxiety relative to our young people in this community as well. So it's no longer just about adults, it's about our young people. And we'll talk more about this afternoon as the city of New Orleans has put forth $10 million in partnership with I want to say Thrive, and with Children's Hospital as well, and the New Orleans Public School and Orleans Parish School Board. Think Thrive Kids, that's the name of the program. It's a 3-year commitment that we're making $10 million over that time period, because the youth in our community have made sure that their voices have been heard and saying that they need help, they need resources. And we know that as well, because too many of our young people are not connected to school nor work. And we're seeing how that spills over even to violent crime in our city. And it's something that we can't take our foot off the gas. We're going to accelerate here in our city. Also, relative to, I talked about the $10 million going to Thrive Kids, but this is associated with one-time money that this city have received through the American Rescue Plan dollars. I fought very hard, single-handedly, so that this city would receive a direct allocation. And we're putting these resources to work in partnership with the New Orleans City Council that has to approve budget and funding allocations. $53.6 million was approved. This was a series of budget ordinances related to ARPA funds, but it was just a holistic and array approach in regards to initiatives that will be, again, meeting people where they are in our city. Over $47 million has been appropriated for projects aimed at violence reduction and human services. We need it now more than ever, putting these resources to work. Even as it relates to our community violence intervention and prevention program, partnering with UMC, $500,000 there. Workforce development initiatives. Nothing stops a bullet like a job. $11 million to empower individuals with skills, meaning soft skills, hard skills, job placement assistance, career advancement, and of course, along the lines of where we're making investments on infrastructure, green jobs in our city. We say jobs of the future, but they're jobs right now created in this city that are real. Very excited that we have onboarded, or we're calling, our Mobile Crisis Intervention Unit. This was onboarded on June the 1st. We called it a soft onboarding. They hit the ground running. And we are really not only excited about it, but we are hopeful that this will again help us reach our goal as it relates to public safety across the board, as well as public health. Everything touches public health. So as we continue to work diligently with our criminal justice partners, again, to reduce violent crime and hold individuals responsible for their actions, and we will again continue to say, meeting people where they are. Accountability breeds accountability, breeds accountability. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, John, and we'll get to Q&A.
Starting with WDSU, if you have a question. Axios New Orleans Caller, do you have a question?
Hi, yes, Mayor. Did you have any big ideas when you went to these conferences? Did you bring home any big ideas? Anything that you heard that really blew your mind that you'd love to see?
Well, one thing that has, I would say, blown my mind is the level of certainty of mayors across this country, again, regardless of party affiliation, that speaks directly to the need for mental health services and resources on the ground in our cities. We need it now more than ever. Spoke very much about preemption legislation even around this, even as it relates to money going directly from the federal government to states, and held pretty much there. But this is where the mental health dollars go, and we need them to be local. We need them to be on the ground. So I'm really looking forward to us hearing and seeing mayors in a more direct way, standing up for what we need in our cities to combat mental health, because the toll that it's taking on our residents are real. Whether, again, domestic violence, violence across the board, homelessness, housing, addiction. It's real in our children. You know, when we're seeing, even as it relates to our young people, being disconnected from school, truancy, not being in school because of depression, and even fighting back the notion that COVID-19 is, of course, we've moved through it, but the impact that it's had on our cities are real. And so we have to, again, stay focused on that. Also, I would say, always, just reassured about how this city is focusing on investing in infrastructure and how we're leading in this country in ways relative to wastewater, relative to stormwater, roads, drainage, streets. We're doing the work, and we're doing the work and even preparing and saving lives while we're doing it. And so, and even when you think about my brother Lumumba in Jackson, the investments that we're making in our utility, we're saving our city from going where cities have had to go. And so, and just continuing to partner and continuing to be inspired. And you need to make sure that leadership is inspired, because I tell you, if you focus on the negative all the time, it breeds negativity, and it has an even more sound effect on the residents that are dealing with so much, especially mental health. So, another thing, and this is me and Mayor Broom, we had several of our mayors talking about mental health. We were talking about our own mental health. And that's something that it helps you as well, especially in these roles, because sometimes the people that we serve don't believe that we're human. Or even when we're taking care of ourselves, that's a problem. If you're exercising, why are you exercising? I have to take care of myself. But it reassured me that taking care of myself is also taking care of my city, taking care of my employees, taking care of my residents, taking care of my young people, because it does help with anxiety, it helps with depression, and it helps you keep your cool. And that's what we need to do, keep our cool. Not just me, but when you look at violence, how it occurs in our city, it's the inability of people calming themselves down. Take a minute. So I brought up Mayor Broom because after the session, the next morning, she said she went out 7 a.m., went working out. She was just reinvigorated because it's the right thing to do. So let me get off that. Go ahead, John. Because I can go on, and I can, anyway, you'll read about it.
Ben, with that, do you have a question?
Sure. With regard to the Gordon Plaza buyouts, one of the buyouts recently, I'm sure you're aware, went to someone who had just recently purchased the home and then flipped it for profit through the buyout program. Do you have any reaction to that or comment on it? And also a specific question, is there any reason why the city couldn't consider the date of purchase when offering the buyouts?
So Gordon Plaza, the city of New Orleans, particularly my administration, created a project that's a real one with the EPA, federal government, which allowed the city to move forward with buyouts, because a solar farm is definitely what we need, but also we know that we needed to, and we really wanted to focus on an injustice of the past and make it right. So this was a win-win-win. In certain instances and throughout the process, it was kind of politicized. Okay? And I would say, quite frankly, with and by the New Orleans City Council. So I would say you set that question right there with the New Orleans City Council. But as it relates to the city of New Orleans and my administration, we will continue to do the right thing. We fought hard for the resources to make that possible, and we'll continue on the path of buying out so that we can reach the goal of making sure that we have a solar farm in the city of New Orleans. You know what, you asked me about my opinions about a buyout that went to, tell me again, Ben?
There was a person that one of the buyouts went to who had purchased the house right around the time that the money was set aside for it, and this person basically flipped it for a very healthy profit. So the question on that was, is there a reason why the city couldn't consider the date of purchase from the person they were buying from to ensure that the folks who were getting the buyouts actually deserve it?
Sure, I think that there's always you can give consideration for everything, right? But at the same time, no matter how well you try to structure a program, you'll always have somebody, always somebody taking advantage. And so, to me, that sounds like taking advantage of an opportunity, and really for us to rewrite a wrong and to create a redundancy of power to our utilities so that we can keep this city safe during any crises that come our way. But unfortunately, that happened. But at the end of the day, I have to stay focused on the end goal. End goal is solar farm. End goal is, rewriting an injustice that occurred. And unfortunately, you always see how some folks seem to take advantage. And it's unfortunate.
Cassie with WDSU.
Yes. Good morning, ma'am. For
Good morning.
last year, we only saw 69 DWI enforcement arrests from the NOPD. I know that that's been a big problem because we need more boots and vehicles on the roadways. What can NOPD and the city do to try to increase enforcement for traffic?
Sure. So first of all, our focus is on violent crime and not that DWIs. We know that they're important. Right? We know in terms of definitely don't want an innocent person being killed by a drunk driver. Absolutely not. But the reality is that we do have a manpower issue, and we are focusing every aspect of our resources on violent crime. We've heard that very loud and clear from the residents that we serve, and we're going to continue to do that. But that doesn't mean that we're not focusing on force multipliers so that we can free up the response of our officers to therefore be redirected in other deployment strategies like traffic and patrolling traffic. When we asked the Louisiana State Police, for example, to come in, as we always do, as a partner to help us with enforcement on our interstates and the like, this is something that we're continuing to move forward. Just yesterday, for example, Chief called me up, indicated that there was even a shortage of state police that were taking advantage of the opportunity, to aid the city with enforcement. And she said, listen, can we look at overtime for LSP as well? Because we know that we have it in place for the New Orleans Police Department. And without a doubt, I said, absolutely. Called up my CAO and told Gilbert, listen, this is what I want to do, and move forward to identify if we can use the current CEA agreement with LSP to make that happen sooner rather than later. But that's in the works right now, I will say. More to come on that, meaning when that will be activated. Like I said, I just initiated this on yesterday. If we can just align it with the current CEA, of course, that makes it easier, and we can move forward with that overtime for LSP almost immediately. That's the goal. And then, of course, civilian hires, again, force multipliers, helping our police officers respond to other matters, even as relates to the mobile crisis unit. So it is our hope that we will continue to get back, or we can move towards more deployment strategies for traffic patrols. That also speaks to the need to hire, recruitment. And we're hiring in the city of New Orleans, and we're hopeful, but we're hiring.
And then I have one question against that as well. What are your thoughts when it comes to a state or city employee who's driving a government vehicle and gets in an accident? Do you believe they should have to take a drug or alcohol test?
Well, that was actually an opinion that was issued by, I know, the Attorney General's office. I don't believe maybe this current one. But that's been discussed previously. And it came back not warning that type of action.
The city policy does have it in there, though.
Yes.
So either way, what are your thoughts? Do you think it should or should not?
Well, as it relates to the city, that's how it is, meaning when a city employee is involved. In terms of the state, I'm the city. So I'm focused on, the people, who I'm accountable for throughout the city of New Orleans.
Thank you.
Fox 8.
Hi, Mayor.
So recently, there was an escape in front of the Juvenile Justice Intervention Center of a juvenile, a 17-year-old, who was in the custody of OJJ. OJJ did not release the name of the individual that had escaped, or who was looking for the individual, or what they had been in custody for. Just want to get your thoughts on that, as far as, being an escape here in the city of New Orleans of a juvenile who obviously had been adjudicated for a crime that was on the loose in the city. And the Office of Juvenile Justice, which is a state office, would not release any information at all for us to release to the public. What are your thoughts on that?
Sure. So, I've always been sounding the alarm on this. It takes everybody who has a real role to play in making sure that we respond and in a way that keeps this community and our people safe, meaning our city overall. I walked through steps, in terms of what happened, and accountability. We weren't notified. My police department wasn't notified. That's unacceptable. But accountability breeds accountability breeds accountability. And it's something that I've been asking for, calling for, and hopefully, we'll start to see things happen in a more direct manner as it relates to accountability. Unacceptable.
Last but not least, WGN.
Good morning, Mayor.
Good morning.
So there's a video circulating on social media of a guy going through a neighborhood shooting at houses and cars. It's got over 1 million views. We talked to NOPD, and they're investigating to find out if it is in fact even in New Orleans.
Yeah, that's true.
And we don't know if it is or not. But what can you say about these social media type of videos, and you can't always believe what you see on social media, and if in fact it is in New Orleans, what does this mean?
Well, what it means is that we're living in times of with social media and the impacts, the negative impacts that it's having on people and behaviors of people. But it's pretty scary as I think about artificial intelligence, quite frankly. That's where my head is. And when I was asked earlier about, mayors and what we were talking about and thinking about, it's how AI is going to impact our cities on the ground. And it's whether being able to distinguish between what's fact and what's fiction. And how we can be shifting heavily into some things that are fiction, but that are embraced as fact. But what I also will say, it speaks to the mental health and the need to focus on mental health, because it's having a direct impact on the mental health of our people of all ages. And we need resources. We need them deployed on the ground. And it also speaks to addiction disorders, and the need for services around that as well as dealing with our homeless community. So I will say is that we need more focus and attention on mental health services and the resources, and also a layer of accountability with social media. I know we've had meetings with Meta, for example, wanting to try to uplift partnerships where we don't show young people, engaging in violent activity or posts that could lead to violent activity in our community. But, we're met with, it's freedom of speech, and the like. So it's something that we're going to have to work through, and I'm just going to stay laser focused on it, but through the lens of mental health.